Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this joint webinar on safe and sustainable by design SSbD approach. My name is Grégory Châtel. I'm the director of the Chimie Verte Academy in France, and we are very pleased to co-organize this webinar together with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and to see such a strong interest for this topic with participants coming from academia, industry, institutions, and training organizations. So now, few words about the Chimie Verte Academy. I know that some of you are already familiar with it, while others, this may be your first introduction. So this is a perfect opportunity to briefly explain who we are and what we do. The Chimie Verte Academy is a national project funded by French government through the France 2030 program under the Skills and Jobs for the Future initiative. And the full title of the project is Attract, Train and Support Towards Innovative and Sustainable Green Chemistry for a Decarbonized and Circular Economy. And as you can imagine, our ambition is to transform chemistry education and training in France with a strong focus on green chemistry, sustainability and innovation from students to professionals. So to achieve this goal, we have built a national consortium bringing together 5 universities in France, each delivering a master's degree in green chemistry. And this academic core is supported by a wide ecosystem of partners, including competitiveness clusters, national training networks, institutional organizations, industrial partners, and professional associations, and the French Chemical Society. And a very important aspect of the Chimie Verte Academy is the balanced governance between academia and industry. And this is essential for us to reconnect these two worlds and to ensure that education, training, and skills development are fully aligned with the evolving needs of the chemical industry and with the European policy objectives. So in this context, the safe and sustainable by design approach is absolutely central for us, not only as a policy framework, but also as a real educational and cultural shift in the way we train future chemists and support professionals. So this is precisely why we are pleased today to welcome our colleagues from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, who are playing a key role in developing and promoting SSbD frameworks at a European level. So we are honored to have with us Serenella Sala, head of the unit of the Joint Research Center, who will provide a general overview of the SSbD frameworks and insights on the sustainability and policy objectives. And also Iranzu Aguirre, project officer of the GRC, who will focus more specifically on safety aspect of the SSbD approach. So this webinar is designed as an accessible introduction to whether you are already familiar with SSbD or discovering it for the first time. This session should give you a clear overview of these frameworks, its objectives, and the importance for future of the chemistry industry. Just last word from my side, feel free to post your question in the question and answer section during all the presentation, because we will take a time at the end of the webinar to answer to your question. So I'm pleased to give the floor to Serenella to start this webinar.
Thanks a lot, Gregory, on behalf of my group, but also on behalf of the other group in the JRC that is involved in this development. We really wanted to be too representative to show the effort, the interdisciplinary effort that is behind this exercise. So I will share my screen. I hope you can confirm you see the slides.
Yes, all is okay.
Okay, so sorry, I try to. Okay, thanks a lot for this invitation, Gregory. I think it's really timely that we act on disseminating even more all the effort that was done through the development of this framework. As you were rightly saying, there is a scientific component related then to also implication for the education, but there is an important implementation component so that we are able to support and steer innovation, and on the other side translate this innovation in something that could be marketable and that could have an impact at scale in this transition. So just maybe a few words on the Joint Research Center. We are a research center, but within the European Commission. We are a Directorate General of the Commission, like we have the DG Environment, the DG RTD. We are having, in any case, a very peculiar role inside the European Commission. We are the Science and Knowledge Service of the European Commission. And our mission is to support the EU policymaking with independent evidence throughout the policy cycle. We are actually located in ISPRA. Our headquarters is in Brussels. Brussels has the rest of the European Commission, but we have several sites across Europe. Iranzu and myself are actually working in Italy in the center in ISPRA, which is the third bigger sites of the Commission after Brussels and Luxembourg. And the content of our presentation is really focused on giving you some input on the safe and sustainable by design framework. On one side, what is the policy context that was, let's say, prompting the origin and the development of the framework. What was, let's say, a bit of history of the methodological development occurred in the last few years, an overview of the framework as it is now, but then we will zoom a bit. Through the contribution of Iranzu, we will zoom on some aspect of the framework, including aspect of the safety. And then I will come back illustrating and zooming a little bit more on the environmental sustainability component and giving you then some final, let's say, overview on some policies that now are uptaking the framework. So starting from the policies that were triggering the development to those that instead now are more and more benefiting from the existence of the framework. So I will start with the needs that we have. So for sure, considering sustainable by design, embracing then safety under a broader concept of sustainability. Of course, we kept in the title of safe and sustainable by design the two separated, but actually there are different ways to address sustainability as a whole, imply that we have to really think if we are designing new substances in a sustainable manner, and it's already recognized that synthetic chemicals are an agent of global change, and that we are developing more and more substances. Several answers, substances are registered new every year in the CAS system. So it's really something where we are moving very, very fast in the development, and often the innovation is not steered by sustainability or safety. But we do the same with new materials, and now even with the help of artificial intelligence, we are potentially designing a number of new materials at a very, very high pace. And this, of course, is also affecting other elements of the innovation, because then new substances and new materials are produced very often with new processes and technologies, are ending up in products that have new functionalities or might be linked to new services or might be in need of new infrastructure. So it's a pretty complex domain of intervention where we really have to understand how also to put let's say, the role of design very prominent. Because if we consider that we need to move more towards responsible research and innovation, so to integrate these considerations very early in our innovation, we have also to help putting several policies and the research that is supporting these policies in synergy. I give you an example. If we start from the chemical production and consumption as a starting point, we know that this chemical production and consumption is causing emissions in the environment. These emissions are impacting the environment, but also human health. If we look from the ecosystem perspective, for example, of course, we might have an impairment of this ecosystem leading to possible biodiversity loss and ultimately potentially impacting planetary health and human health. So today we have a set of policies, and this is just an example, that are addressing certain aspects. For example, through the REACH regulation, where we are in need of providing data and having an authorization for chemicals on the market. For the emissions, for example, and the production of chemicals, we have the Industrial Emission Directive. Towards the products that are containing chemicals, and we have recently had the release of the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, with an ambition to minimize the pollution overall. So there is another initiative of the Commission which is called Zero Pollution. And this ultimately, besides other implications for other policies, is, for example, an important input in the biodiversity strategy. And ultimately to say, okay, we need to consider the one health for the environment, for humans as an ambition. And of course, we have several drivers of impacts, because we might have emission of toxic chemicals, but we might have also carbon footprint, or we might need certain resources, so water footprint, land footprint. So this, in light of considering that, all these policies that, let's say, start with the chemical production and the raw material extraction, consider that might need really to be anticipated through initiative addressing the design of chemicals and materials, the innovation stage that is the input to all the rest of this cycle. And with the ambition to this One Health goal of remaining within the planetary boundaries, so an environmental sustainability concern, but also an important concern in relation to human health. So the design of the Safe and Sustainable by Design framework is, as I said, an important interdisciplinary effort. It's putting together ingredients of several disciplines. On one end, the sustainability science and the ambition, like those charted by the Sustainable Development Goals, and the link to the so-called absolute sustainability. So considering that we have certain limits in our planet, the capacity of our planet to sustain the level of pollution that we are exerting, and to remain, as I said, within these planetary boundaries. But on the other side, there are disciplines like the green chemistry, the green engineering, the circular chemistry, the sustainable chemistry, which over time were listing a number of design principles to steer innovation, to steer the development of new substances, materials, and processes. But actually, assuming that applying the design was sufficient to have something at the end green, while we might need instead to test how safe and how sustainable these options are. And in the early days, there was an approach called called the Safe by Design, considering more specifically the safety, but also other approaches considering entirely the supply chain of chemicals from raw materials to the end of life, like life cycle assessment, and more in general, risk-based approaches, again, for environment and human health. Traditionally, all these things that I depicted in this slide are related to competencies that in universities are developed, let's say, in different domains and in different fronts. So from the environmental science to the engineering to chemistry courses, or to courses that are considering also more socioeconomic dimensions of sustainability. So the attempt of our framework was to put in sync the different disciplines towards guiding innovation for safe and sustainable by design. Actually, we were also looking at what was the development over time of the framework. We published, if you are interested to have a look, a review of approaches that were proposed over time on the sustainability assessment frameworks to really build on the most robust and solid foundation, our framework. This is really because the literature, the scientific literature, is now full of claims of being green, saying, this is a green material, this is a green chemicals. But at the end, we realize that very often what is called green might result that in something that at the end is full of trade-off, it's full of implications either on the safety or on the environmental side. So what we were in need of was really to have a framework that was able to address the challenge of, let's say, steering the innovation towards something that is effectively more safer and more sustainable. The building blocks from the policy context perspective were this ambition I mentioned on the zero pollution, an ambition on climate neutrality, and an ambition on circular economy. These putting in a perspective of the one health that I mentioned before, human health, environmental health, and animal health. So in the early days, this work started in 2021 in JRC with the first release of a report in 2022, was really a building block, an action of the chemical strategy for sustainability. There was a call to say we need to develop a framework helping us putting together these elements. And that was already recognized in 2022 as an important enabler of sustainability transition. And it was integrated in the Strategic Research and Innovation Plan as a specific chapter, a specific focus on how to put safe and sustainable by design at the service of a transition of chemical industries and the industries dealing with new materials. What we have now in the safe and sustainable by design framework is really something that would like to evolve towards having what it's, let's say, in the domain of green chemistry, embracing other challenges. I reported here an illustration, which is an illustration from the journal Green Chemistry of some of the key green chemistry principles that we have to look in perspective with the climate neutrality, as I mentioned before, with the circular economy, with the bioeconomy and the push towards alternative feedstock on the one hand, on the need of embracing supply chain and assessing supply chain in their entirety, but also more and more a strategic autonomy lens. Which raw materials are we using? Is this a raw material that is critical because it can have a supply risk? So all these elements are all linked with different policies ambitions, but are also in need while you are developing your innovation to be considered in sync. And of course, we are experiencing an important transition that is going beyond the green transition, which is the digital transition. So how to make this operational, exploiting at maximum what the digital transition may give us, while considering, as I said, this more the context of sustainability. So the framework started, and this is the, let's say, the two covers of where we started and where we are now. So it started with a proposal of a framework that has been recently updated in a revised framework just released in December, that will also inform a new recommendation by the Commission, and is intended to serve as a voluntary approach to guide innovation processes of chemicals and material. So to steer, as I said, the innovation process, to substitute or minimize the production and use of substance of concern, but also overall to minimize the impact on health, climate, and the environment all along the supply chain. So from sourcing, production, use and disposal of chemicals, materials, and products. In a nutshell, we really want to be very bold on this. Application of design or redesign principle alone are not enough. We need to test through safety and sustainability assessment what is included in our innovation. And this is really why in the revised Safe and Sustainable by Design framework, we have a number of steps. We start with the need for innovation for design and redesign, and we consider a number of elements. Iranzo will enter more into these steps, especially the first steps, but the idea is really that we need to systematize the way in which, from the scoping and the scenarios that we are setting for our innovation, we then have a sufficient, robust structure for our safety and sustainability assessment, to the interpretation of the results, the analysis of the results, but also the documentation of how we were integrating this concept in our innovation. And you see that this is a circle, because it's meant to really accompany the evolution also along the different technology readiness level, where, for example, also more data can be available. If we just focus a bit on the safety and sustainability assessment, what you will hear from us is that we have a component that is very, very important on how to enable the safety assessment along the life cycle, but also on the other side, how to enable the sustainability assessment, not only focusing on the substance itself, but also including the processes. And so this is very important also in light of chemical engineering consideration. So the processes that should be safer and that should be more sustainable. So with that, I pass the floor to Iranzo to zoom on the first part, and then we will go back also to the sustainability assessment part on the environmental sustainability and socioeconomic dimension.
Sorry for that. I didn't unmute myself and I only have one screen. It's a bit difficult. I hope that you can hear me and also see my screen. I will start, as Seremela was saying, actually, I will focus my presentation on the scoping analysis, that it's an important element of the framework that we already incorporated in the methodological guidance, and now that we, with the revised framework, we formalize it. And in order to talk about the scoping analysis, I cannot avoid talking about the structure that Seremela already presented, because everything is linked, as we were saying. The circle or the structure, the new structure of the framework actually represents this iterative approach that happens in innovation, and how the scoping sets these iterations, it's important. So these are the elements of the new structure, and all of them, as I said, are linked with the scoping analysis. but with one as well important aspect that in the framework we also wanted to strengthen. It was already in the previous framework. We talked about it throughout the different years where we tested the framework, but we felt the need of coining these SSbD principles in order to understand when we are applying the framework what is the ambition that we want to achieve. So basically is that we want to do consider safety and sustainability aspects throughout the entire innovation. As Serenella was saying, it's not enough only to design something and assess based on this design, but we need to ensure that safety and sustainability are really considered throughout the entire innovation. And for that, we need this iterative and tiered approach as well that combines the innovation throughout different iterations as we gain experience, information, data, and therefore uncertainty is reduced. This assessment needs to be considered with the entire life cycle perspective. It's not that we focus in one life cycle stage because everything is as well linked with the entire life cycle. So there is a need to ensure safety and sustainability throughout the entire life cycle. As we are talking about different disciplines, as Serenella also mentioned, and we are talking about innovation, we need this multidisciplinary engagement with innovators, safety assessors, sustainability assessors, etc., and also because we are talking about this life cycle perspective with the actors in the life cycle, in the value chain. And then in order to come to a common understanding on how we implement the framework and to be transparent in this sense, we need a documentation part where we transparently inform about the completeness of these principles and also with the traceability of the assessment that we are doing throughout the entire innovation. So this is actually what, at least from my point of view, it's what the paradigm the SSbD on how we do innovate considering all these different aspects. And in order to contextualize this innovation, no, because in the end we are applying the SSbD framework because there is an innovation in place, we have the scoping analysis that is what is telling us how far from this completeness of the principles we are in the innovation. And as an outcome of this analysis, we also start talking about the scenarios because we know that not all the innovations can follow these considerations the same way. So as I was mentioning, and Serenella as well mentioned, there is an innovation that is taking place and where we want to apply the framework. So one important thing is to understand this and that we can have different innovations with different approaches, with different perspectives, and we need to acknowledge this. For instance, we can have completely new solutions to a need, breakthrough or disruptive innovations, but it can happen as well if, especially we talk about industry, where they already have a system in place and basically they want to improve some aspects of the safety and the sustainability, and therefore we might have incremental innovations that are focused on very specific life cycle stages or safety and sustainability aspects. As I said, these innovations can come from different needs, but we need to as well understand what is the goal in the context of safety and sustainability and these life cycles. And there as well, why we are applying in this innovation the SSbD can be to ensure safety and sustainability performance, or it can be as well to demonstrate that this innovation has achieved the goal with regards to safety and sustainability that we wanted. So one of the aspects that we need to understand when we talk about the scoping analysis is that it's an aim of aligning these disciplines that we are mentioning before, that we need to come to a common understanding on what we want to achieve with the SSbD. Very shortly, to mention that if we consider the both dimensions of the assessment, the safety assessment and the life cycle assessment, we can see that we follow basically the same structure. We have the problem formulation in when we are talking about safety assessment, or the goal and scope when we are talking about life cycle assessment, where we formulate what is the problem that we want to solve, or what is what we want to assess. Then we have the gathering of this information, we analyze the quality of this information, we do the assessment, and then we conclude and we interpret these results. And the outcome usually is that, we might need to gather more information, we need to refine the problem formulation, etc., etc. And this is the process that we follow in both of them. So very similar, but we have to bear in mind that actually when we are talking about these two assessments, the different thing is the goal and score, or the objectives of the assessment. While in safety assessment, it has become very focused and very specific assessment. In the sustainability assessment, it's more this life cycle perspective. So there is a need, especially maybe more from the safety world, where we work very much on silos, and as I said, very specific, there is a need to align this. And this is the reason why we talk about, in the context of the SSbD, about the scoping analysis, that in the end, it's a bit coming this common goal and scope when we are talking about the implementation of the SSbD and the different assessments within the framework. So then basically, that's what the scoping analysis does. Contextualize the innovation into the framework and the four principles that I mentioned before. It does that by defining the system where we are applying the framework, defining the innovation, what is the goal of this innovation, what is the action, the redesign, what is what we are doing in order to improve the safety and sustainability, and then how are we going in the end to prove that we have achieved these goals, setting criteria, setting, defining specific indicators, setting rules to take decisions, etc., etc. And an important aspect as well is the consideration of the actors in the life cycle, because this will give us an indication of the certainty with regards to the assessment that we are doing with safety and sustainability, and also the impact that the innovation can have. We ask several questions that tackle these elements that I was mentioning: the system, the innovation, and the actors in the life cycle. And a bit another way of presenting it in order to understand how they are linked with the different principles that I mentioned before of the SSbD. So as I said, it's a way of contextualizing the innovation in the SSbD. Why we need this? It's because this way, the outcome of the questions according to these principles will give us, will tell us the scenario in which we are in order to achieve these common goals that are in the end the principles of the SSbD. Because we can think, if we are talking about innovations, and our specific innovation. Now, I am a company that suddenly decided to solve a problem, putting a solution on the market. We start very at tier lower levels, and we need to, as we were saying, achieve these goals of the completeness of the SSbD principles, but I need to follow a path. Here I use this similarity with climbing a mountain, where we have like the baseline, where we start from, where are we, what we want to achieve, and then what are the milestones that we need to follow in order to achieve these goals. But we can have different scenarios, different kind of companies, different solutions for the same problem. We can be talking about innovations that already, for instance, the incremental ones that I mentioned before, where there is already some knowledge about what we want to achieve. So we start a bit higher in the mountain, or we can as well look for solutions where we already have the engagement with all the actors in the life cycle and can be more straightforward, the assessment and achieving these goals that are the principles of the SSbD. So in the end, the scenario, it's the outcome of the scoping analysis, and it tells us the real specific conditions where we are in order to achieve these goals, and how we can set as well different milestones, short-term milestones, in order to achieve these goals. And it also helps us to define or to implement and to do the safety and sustainability assessment in a tailored way and focus in order to achieve these goals. So basically, as I said, it allows to tailor the safety and sustainability assessment. And then, of course, we cannot talk about the completeness of the circle of the innovation without talking about the evaluation and the documentation, as Serenella was mentioning, because in the end, what we do with the scoping analysis and with setting the scenarios is basically plan what we are going to do in the innovation and plan as well how we are going to demonstrate that the implementation of the innovation and the assessment, the safe and sustainable assessment, really in the end demonstrate what we wanted to achieve. So basically the evaluation presents the outcome of the assessment and compares them with what it was the intention at the beginning. And as we are talking that innovation, it's not a linear thing, but it's an iterative thing we learn by doing. The outcome of this evaluation can be that, okay, we need to extend the scope. We might start with a very focused scope where we have direct control, but as we said, the principles of the SSbD are having all this entire system mind thinking, considering everything. So it can be as well that we can define or refine the objectives in the sense that maybe we achieve what we wanted, but we become more ambitious and we can as well improve our improvement. We can as well consider redesign actions that can be refined. Additional information might be needed in most of the cases when we start doing the assessment, or we will achieve a moment where we will be happy with the certainty that we have achieved, and we can ensure that our solution is safe and sustainable by design. And then, as I said before, there is an important aspect that it's the documentation. That the documentation allows us to communicate in an harmonized way the implementation of the framework in innovation. Transparency with regards of achieving the completeness of these principles, traceability in the context of how we have done the assessment and how we can keep track of where these chemicals and as well, this documentation in the end can serve as a communication instrument to demonstrate the implementation of the framework or for other purposes. So then I now move to the part of the safety assessment a bit more in detail, and what might have to be considered and what has changed a bit in the revised framework. When we talk about safety, we are not talking about the chemical safety. We have here an illustration of a life cycle of a chemical material, where you see that if we follow only the chemical, that is, for instance, how we do it in the REACH processes, we focus on the chemical, the assessment is focused on the chemical, and how we manufacture the chemical, how other companies use this chemical to process them into formulations, different activities. We have then chemical products, materials, but these ones as well can be further processes or used at industrial environments. And then at the end, we have what we can call consumer product, where it's used by consumers. As I said, this is the straight line that we can follow when we are doing the chemical safety assessment, but there are other perspectives in which we can as well assess safety. Like, for instance, as Serenella already mentions, process safety. It's very important as well within a company, within manufacturing or processing company, they look at the safety from a different perspective, not only from the chemical. We can have more chemicals involved. We have as well process variables that can as well affect safety, environmental releases, etc., etc. And we can as well look at the safety from the chemical material as a product safety. And as well, we can look at safety from the receptors perspective. Now, we have worker safety in these companies' environments, but we have as well to consider the environmental safety and the consumer safety. So there are different angles that we can approach the safety, and therefore we need to consider in the context of the SSbD all of them. This is the reason why, especially when we are talking about the safety, is that important, the scoping analysis, because this is what it gives us this broader perspective of the entire life cycle and the different safety assessments that we have to do, considering the different life cycle stages, but also this perspective. So here, when we talk about the scoping analysis in the context of the safety, is this perspective. We talk about the completeness of the SSbD principles, we talk about the SSbD system, and we talk about the maturity of the implementation with regards to safety, simplified, intermediate, or full. But then we have as well the top-down approach, that is more the focus of the safety assessment. And here, as I said, we are talking about the chemical life cycle, and here looking at safety from different perspectives, the chemical itself, the process or the product, but also the receptors, as I was saying before, workers, consumers, and environment. We look more for the robustness of the safety assessment with regards to the quality and certainty of the data. And here we talk more about qualitative, semi-quantitative, and quantitative, because when we talk about safety, usually it's always full. It's two different elements that we need to consider, but then they have always to be there. The difference is what is the quality of this data and the certainty of this data. And here we talk more about the maturity of the innovation. So as I mentioned before, and I'm not going to read everything, but basically here is when we talk about the problem formulation in the context of the safety assessment, that basically adds granularity and specificity to the scoping analysis that we did already at the beginning. It defines the purpose, the scope, and the strategy for the specific safety assessment, the focus safety assessment. It defines what is being assessed among all these elements that we can have in the life cycle, why, how, and ensures that for that reason that the assessment is focused and efficient, because otherwise without clear formulation, safety assessment risks to become very broad and focused and then misaligned with these goals that we wanted to achieve with regards to the safety. And here is when we can define whether we are approaching it from the chemical perspective, from the product perspective, consumer, worker, or process. I wanted as well to mention that when we are talking about safety, as I said, we always have to consider because the exposure, when we are talking about the impact, is what is really important. And the exposure is what it tells us what is the possibility of being exposed to a certain hazard and what is the consequence, the severity of this consequence. In the SSbD, we talk about safety. So safety, it's not only doing the risk assessment, but an important element as well is how we manage this risk. So, and then as well, that for that reason, we need to consider these elements and not, in some cases we hear that hazard identification is already doing safety, or hazard classification is already doing safety. Because if we don't talk about safety with this robustness, then maybe we shouldn't be talking about safety assessment, and maybe we can talk about other things. And I think that with that, the last slide is just to say that there are many different approaches that we need this focus on the safety, and this is what we have tried to improve in the revised framework, and also with the additional guidance in the methodological guidance, that we can look at the safety from different perspectives, but that we and we can do safety assessment with different approaches. And this we decide depending on what is the focus of the innovation, as I said, chemical material process, the life cycle stage, the problem formulation, the aim of the assessment, what is the outcome, what is what we want to decide, depending on the material that we are on the assessment, the scope, the expertise as well of the assessors, the accepted uncertainty and the maturity of the SSbD implementation and the innovation. And I think that with that, Serenella, I hand over to you again.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. Yes, I was saying that Iranzu was illustrating to you the part of the framework that is also embracing the safety. And now, really in a couple of minutes, just to give you an idea, we are addressing instead the part of the environmental sustainability by means of life cycle assessment. In a nutshell, life cycle assessment is an approach of integrated assessment of several environmental dimensions. So you have a goal and scope that could be indeed your chemical or your material. You have to systematically account for the resources that you are in need in the production and use and disposal of your chemical and materials, and translate these emissions and resources into impacts. Typically, now the Commission is recommending 16 different environmental dimensions. So the exercise is going well beyond a climate footprint of the chemicals, but is addressing other footprints. Specifically in the framework, we are recommending to rely on the environmental footprint life cycle impact assessment, so on the European Commission recommendation on life cycle assessment that basically are having an ambition to facilitate the comparison across different substances and materials. And my unit is running since more than 15 years the European platform on life cycle assessment, where we really represent a reference on the development of methods and data for conducting life cycle assessment. And this is also going, hand in hand with the policies that over time we're basically integrating life cycle assessment as a reference methodology for supporting assessment. Of course, the life cycle assessment is pretty complex because it's in need of addressing a number of elements. And what we are trying also in the evolution of the framework, but as well in the testing of the implementation of the framework, is to handle this complexity. So on one side, we have attention towards applicability and communication. On the other side, on robustness and comprehensiveness. So very, very quickly, I will just illustrate to you what we were introducing in the last framework, with the idea that to conduct a full life cycle assessment, you might need a number of data that very often at the very early stage of your innovation, you don't have. And so you have a sort of tiered approach that is guiding you from the screening assessment of the elements that along the life cycle may be already hints of possible impacts associated with your innovation, with the idea of really being a decision support tool. So when you have 10 options in front of you, to reduce the number of options towards then the next level of innovation, where maybe you can already apply a simplified LCA or an intermediate LCA up to potentially really evaluating the environmental profile of your solution in a more ample manner. And the full LCA will really requires that you are testing your innovation against a reference, and then you see if you are really bringing something that is generating a benefit or a burden. But that if you are not at the level of conducting a complete LCA or a simplified LCA against a reference, that you can start building a proxy reference related, for example, to process parameter. Of course, if you are handling and producing a chemical with high temperature, very often this is related to higher energy demand, and this higher energy demand can hint to a higher carbon footprint. So it's really to frame the analysis, considering what an LCA would require you to do, but developing as much as possible proxy indicator. What it was, one of the efforts for the latest framework was the development of an approach to compare with the generic benchmarks. Since at the level of an intermediate level of maturity, you might not have all the information needed to compare one-to-one your new chemical or new material with an existing one. The idea for us was to develop a benchmark value considering chemicals and materials that are already on the market. Our first step was indeed with representative chemicals on the market. So just to give you a very quick illustration, if you see this graph, these represent the carbon footprint of these representative chemicals, collecting data in different databases that are providing information on climate change. You see that there is a certain level of uncertainty associated with the different chemicals, but still you might ask with your chemical where you are in comparison of this benchmark. And for example, you may say, okay, I'm here, so there are some elements of my innovation where I have to think if I can reduce the carbon intensity associated with my innovation. And of course, you can do that then looking at all the other impact categories for which we were generating a benchmark. So in a nutshell here, the idea is really to be able to accompany from the screening assessment to the full LCA, an integration of the life cycle thinking in the innovation, and an integration of, we cannot look only on the toxicity aspect and toxicity footprint. We cannot look only of the carbon footprint. We have to handle a complexity of different environmental dimensions. And we were also complementing this analysis with a socioeconomic assessment that is enabling our full sustainability, let's say, approach. And there I will mention just 3 elements. One element is the framework is mentioning social life cycle assessment, is mentioning critical raw materials so that you can integrate consideration on strategic autonomy very early in your innovation, but also element of externalities. So the cost, not as direct cost of your innovation, but the cost as societal cost. So if you are producing something that is generating impacts, then there are costs that society should bear and that can be addressed. So I conclude with this, that the safe and sustainable by design, we said, was prompted by certain policies, but is now mentioned in a number of policies that are already in place, like the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, but also the Advanced Material Act, the Chemical Industry Action Plan, the Bioeconomy Strategy, and it's supposed to also support upcoming policies that are also expected this year, like the Biotech Act 2, the Advanced Material Act, the Circular Economy Act. This is just to say it's important that we consider that there is a shift happening towards the need of integrating very, very early these considerations into the design. I skipped 2 slides for brevity of what we need to present, but I wanted just to say that we will share the slides so you will have access to information on the evolution. There will be the possibility of accessing materials and recordings of a bootcamp that we had. So if you want to delve more into the world of the SSbD, but you will have also the contacts from the GRTD, but also from us to follow our developments. Thanks a lot. I hope it was useful for you.
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And do not hesitate to ask a question on the specific section if you have some comments or some questions. And I have one that arrived. So if someone here wants to start applying SSbD tomorrow in their works, what would be the first step you would recommend?
I would say to read the framework, the revised framework that is giving, I would say, in relatively few pages, an idea of the, let's say, complexity of the assessment on the other side, but also how to frame and have also an approach to screening, in the sense that a lot of effort that was put in this revised framework was really to guide the innovation really from the first steps. And so to consider that you might need to reduce the complexity of the assessment when you are in a very early stage. And I think another good reading could be the methodological guidance that we have in place. Another one is under revision and will be available hopefully in a few months. But the previous one probably is, again, a good source of information accompanying on certain steps, keep taking your hand and accompanying you on saying, for example, on the safety aspect that Iranzu was mentioning, but also on the LCA, okay, if you are a first mover, what to do. I don't know, Iranzu, if you think we need to suggest something else, but already these two reading, I think, would be helpful.
Okay. So no question from the audience. I have another one about the new version of the SSbD frameworks. How does this version better address the balance between safety and sustainability compared to the previous one?
The balance in terms, if you have, I don't know, to weight one against
What
the
is
other.
new in the new version?
What we presented is the new version. So the aspect where really these focus on the scoping and the scenarios, so to frame well what the innovation is expected to address, to also help reducing, let's say, the complexity in the assessment. So to try to have these elements going hand in hand. And then we were putting a lot of emphasis on the documentation and the evaluation. So the transparency, because of course it could be a daunting exercise to do everything at once, but it's important that it's transparently reported how you were integrating in the innovation, what you were doing. I think these are at least the two main highlights. Then we were also trying, compared to the previous framework, to simplify a little bit in the assessment part what has to be done. But what we were presenting was indeed already the new framework.
We have a question from Soraya. How we can consider that this concept will be mandatory, or it is only advised approach?
Okay, so on this we have to be very clear. This is a voluntary approach. It's not meant to be at this stage mandatory. So this is the fact that it's integrated in different policies is important to be considered, because these policies are also moving the resources for innovation. And for example, already from the very beginning of the first recommendation on the SSbD, these approaches were included, for example, in calls, for example, Horizon calls for the development of new chemicals and new materials. Or on the advanced materials communication, for example, it was said, if with public funds we want to support further the development of these advanced materials should be accompanied by a study following safe and sustainable by design. So I would say it's voluntary, but it's something that is welcomed, especially when you want to have an innovation that is also supported by public funds, really with the ambition of saying we try to have a development that is serving not only economic ambitions to have new chemicals, new materials, new function, but also societal needs to have chemicals and materials that are more sustainable, that are reducing cost. I don't know if any of you is following now the discussion on the cost for the pollution for the PFAS. So the cost for improving the innovation compared to what the society has now to pay for that is, it's really huge difference in terms of magnitude of the cost. So it's really, for me, an evolution of the concept of the precautionary principle. So the precautionary principle in Europe was meant to help us assessing chemicals when the development of the innovation was already pretty mature. So before entering the market, this is like saying we have to think strategically from the very beginning. So it's really a mindset shift for me.
We have a technical question from Martina. Is the Joint Research Center providing standardized data and methodology to perform the monetization of externalities from LCA results?
We have a publication on that where we were studying all the monetization approaches that were available in literature. So the publication is available. We are not recommending a single set of monetization for a very specific reason of robustness. All the monetization approaches developed in literature so far were developed for the 16 impact categories that I showed you, often adopting different monetization approaches. So we don't have in literature a unique coherent set of monetization. So what we were providing was a range of monetization value that is available in our the documentation. But yes, it's there, can be accessed, and through these ranges you might have an idea of the externality cost associated with your innovation.
Okay, and maybe a last question about education. Do you see education and training as a key lever for the success of SSbD, and how can universities could contribute?
For me, this is super essential. It's the reason why we would like to engage even more with you all, in the sense that, as I said, this is really an exercise where different disciplines should converge. Of course, we might have in future people that maybe are mastering well the different components of the assessment, but most likely you might have people that are very solid in their own competencies. I don't know, a chemical engineer or a chemist, an industrial chemist developing, or an assessor, an ecotoxicologist, whatever. But it's important that they are trained and they are aware of these approaches to enter into this evaluation with the right mindset, which is a mindset of dialogue with the other disciplines to understand how things could be put in sync to work together. So this is also what we are trying within the JRC to do. Already we are representing, Iranzo and myself, two words, the words of, let's say, more the safety and the sustainability. We are now saying there is another word, which is the word of the engineering, that is, again, a dimension that we really need to put in dialogue in the innovation. I don't know, Iranzo, on this, if you have something to comment, but I think really the education is a key. We need a new generation, let's say, of people with their own competencies and expertise and their own role along the innovation, but trained on this dialogue.
Okay, so it's
maybe to say something. It's that I fully agree with what Serenella was saying. There is this need of raising awareness, and that there is a need to communicate, and also that what a bit linked with the previous question, that it's also a need of changing the mindset in, as we said, or as I tried to illustrate at the beginning, the paradigm shift that it represents is that the way we now see the things, that we need to communicate more, try to speak the same language, and also try to already integrate this way of thinking, that it's take it for granted in some cases, but it's not that obvious for others.
Thank you. So it's now the time to conclude the webinar. So a recording will be made available in coming days. And I would like to warmly thank Serenella and Iranzo for their very insightful contribution. And also thank you all the participants. We have a request in the question section about to have more information about materials on recording from the SSbD bootcamp. So I propose to share the link in the next communication to all the participants. So all is available on the website. So
I think, Gregory, if you agree, we can put we can share the slides and make this available to the participant. And while you are sharing these, we put also the link to the bootcamp, so in case they want, they can follow. And of course, they are also welcome to register to our upcoming stakeholder workshop that will be in March, 19 and 20 of March in Brussels, but can be also followed online. So I think it will be worth you also to share the registration link to this event, or at least to the registration page if the registration is not open yet, because I think for those interested it could also be quite important to follow this workshop, where there will be also the first mover on the SSbD sharing on their experiences on the application and the challenges they face there.
Sure. So we will send you all the elements. So thank you again. We wish you an excellent day, and we will continue this discussion soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot again for the invitation, and have a nice continuation of the day. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And apply the SSbD.